I have the pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker for tonight. Our guest speaker was born on September 13, 1957. He is the second child of former President Ferdinand Adeline Marcos and former First Lady and incumbent Congresswoman Imelda Romualdez Marcos of the 2nd District of Ilocos Norte. He studied elementary in the Lasal College, finished his secondary education in Worth School in England, and earned his bachelor's degree in political science, philosophy, and economics from the Oxford University in 1978. He obtained his master's in business administration from the Wharton School of Business. In his 17 years of public service, he has achieved for himself a distinguished record as a lawmaker, government official, and public administrator. At a very young age of 23, he was elected Vice Governor of Ilocos Norte. In 1992, he was elected to Congress as representative for the 2nd District of his home province, Ilocos Norte. He authored the landmark law establishing the Philippine Youth Commission. He was also instrumental in advancing the cause of cooperatives by devoting most of his countryside development fund by organizing cooperatives of teachers and farmers in his home province. In 1998, he was governor of Ilocos Norte, where he served for 3 consecutive terms. In his 9 years as governor, he transformed Ilocos Norte into a first-class province, showcasing its natural and cultural tourism destination areas, as well as its pioneer wind power technology that serves as an alternative source of energy for the needs of the province and neighboring towns. In 2007, he was elected back to the House of Representatives, where he served as Deputy Minority Leader. During this term, one of the important pieces of legislation he authored was the Philippine Archipelagic Baselines Law, or Republic Act No. 9522. In 2010, he won a seat in the Philippine Senate, placing 7th overall and first of the 2 real Senate newcomers. Presently, he chairs the Senate Committee on Local Government and the Committee on Public Works, and is a member of several other committees. Fellow Lions, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Senator Ferdinand Bongbong Romualdez Marcos Jr.
Thank you very much for that very kind and thorough introduction. I would like to greet the District Governor, Alfonso Lahan, immediate past District Governor, Jose Peña, Council Chairman M. Ang, FG Reynaldo Ang, past Council Chairperson Roberto Laurel, First Lady Regina Laurel, the officers and members of District 301A2, and the club presidents, officers, past and present, of the various Lions clubs of this district, and your loyal spouses, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my friends, good evening. Allow me first of all by thanking you all for this very kind invitation that you extended me to what was a surprisingly grand occasion. I was just teasing the district governor that if he had told me earlier I could have dusted off my tuxedo, which has not left my closet for the last year. And maybe nagamit ko naman yung tuxedo ko na napakamahal, pero hindi ko na nagagamit. But maybe next time. I would also like to extend my sincerest congratulations to the newly elected officers and directors, and to warmly congratulate you all as you celebrate this 31st anniversary. As your letter invitation indicated, your district members would like to know of my legislative agenda as Senator of the Republic, in my present positions especially as Chairman of the Committee on Local Government and Chairman of the Committee of Public Works. But before I do that, perhaps it would be good to explain how senators actually form their legislative agenda. It has been of some concern to all of us senators that when we have surveys and we ask ordinary people, do you know what the job of the senator is? The response is that no, they do not. And so let me try and give you some kind of insight as to what goes on behind the scenes. Let me take this opportunity to discuss with you how a senator, or any legislator for that matter, can be identified with a particular legislative agenda. The legislative agenda of a legislator can be perceived through the following. First, through the proposed bills and resolutions that he or she personally files. Second, through the bills, though not necessarily their own, that the legislator prioritizes and facilitates in its processing in the committees and in plenary. And third, through bills, whether his creation or not, that he individually supports, espouses, and votes for. To complete the picture, lawmaking does not stop there. There is the counterpart bills and proposals from the lower house. We also have to coordinate and consider in relation to similar bills from measures sponsored in the Senate. Of course, the final action lies with the President, and through his signature or veto, determine the final fate of all these proposed measures. Experience and areas of strength of a legislature can play a significant role in the shaping of the legislative agenda of that legislature. In my case, it was my experience as a local government official in Ilocos Norte that did play a crucial role in my critical understanding of the issues and problems confronting our local government structure and the system of delivery of services by local government institutions and entities. Similarly, my constant involvement with the infrastructure build-up of our province, as well as the public works projects of the LGUs, assisted by funds made available by our office, contributed largely to my appointment as chair of the Senate, of the Senate Public Works Committee. Although I will have to admit that although I do not consider myself a particular expert on public works, I think what happened was that I was making all kinds of pronouncements about the lack or the strengthening of public investment in infrastructure development in our country. And I was harping on about this, and finally, when we were deciding the chairmanships of the different committees, sinabi sa akin, kasi alam na namin na si Senator Int'l ang magiging Senate President. Sabi sa akin, he turns to me during our meeting and he says to me, o sige, ikaw, Bongbong, ang kulit-kulit mo tungkol sa infrastructure, kunin mo na yung Committee on Public Works. So, siguro yung Committee on Public Works is not from long experience or expertise. Itong committee na ito nakuha sa kapulitan. In short, all these experiences are precisely considered by my colleagues and by the leadership of the House, of the upper house, in entrusting to me the chairmanship of the Senate Committee on Local Government in the 15th Congress. This 16th Congress, I was again named the chair of the Local Government Committee and to replace what used to be my chairmanship in the Housing and Urban Development Committee and Resettlement Committee, I was put now as chair of the Public Works Committee. This is precisely why, in the course of the years, I have taken as much time as possible to participate in many different public fora on the discussions regarding the pressing issues of our country, both at the local and at the national level. I also firmly believe that there is a need for our legislature to be able to contribute to nation building through individual bills, which are the outputs from the committee hearings and technical working group meetings. This will consequently result in the passage of laws, resolutions, and other important plenary decisions of the Senate. I can report with a certain amount of confidence and pride that over the past 3 years of my senatorial stint, we have managed to produce a decent portfolio of accomplishments that can be considered worthy of and in fulfillment of the expectations of our country. As chair of the Senate Committee on Local Government, we were also able to pass legislation by acting on the bills of our counterparts in the House of Representatives, geared at re-engineering our local government structure through the creation of certain provinces and barangays and cities, conversion of qualified municipalities. A typical example of this kind of work would be Quezon City. Quezon City previously had only 4 districts, but we know that Quezon City is actually, if we are to look at the numbers, the population, the voting population of Quezon City is really, should have more districts. So we have increased that from 4 to 6 and have created 2 additional districts. Ito ang mga ginagawa ng Committee on Local Government na tuloy-tuloy ang pagsusuri sa ating mga local government institution para makita kung anong mga pagbabago ang kinakailangan ng ating mga LGU. In my 3 years as chairman in the 15th Congress of the Senate Committee on Urban Planning and Housing and Resettlement, we were able to pass on 3rd reading the creation of the Department of Housing and Urban Development and prioritize other bills on socialized housing, including a more concrete bill focused on housing programs for local government employees. It has always been a failure, that has been my view, it has always been a failure of government, that we are unable to provide housing to our employees in government, those who work in government. Kaya nakakalungkot na makakita ng ating mga empleyado na sila ang nagpapatakbo ng bureaucracy, sila ang nagpapatakbo ng pamahalaan at malalaman nila lang sila pala ay nagsasquatter dahil hindi sila makahanap, hindi sila makakuli, hindi nila kaya makakuha ng bahay na lupa. Kaya ito ay aming trinabaho at dahan-dahan sa palagay natin ay magkakaroon na ng pamamaraan para naman ang ating government employees ay pagbibigyan at magkaroon na rin ng disenteng bahay at lupa. I also registered my official positions on other important legislative proposals of national import. I registered a yes vote to the K-12 education system and to the very contentious RH bill, bearing in mind the health of our underprivileged pregnant mothers. And sa awa ng Diyos, hindi naman yata kami na-excommunicate. On the sin tax bill, I voiced my strong opposition to the very exorbitant increase in the excise taxes on tobacco products. This is, of course, because of my long-standing position in government as representative of Ilocos Norte. Siguro naman, hindi katakataka na aking ipinaglaban ang industriya ng tobacco dahil ito ay pinanggagalingan ng hanap buhay ng marami sa aming mga Ilocano. Kaya naman, ito po ay pinaglaban natin at sa ngayon ay pinagmamasdan kung ito ba ay kailangan pang pag-aralan, kailangan pang i-debate dahil tinitignan natin ang ano ba ang naging tunay na epekto sa hanap buhay ng mga nagtatanim at nagpapatagahan ng tabako. I also supported the cybercrime law which despite some of its flaws, is a very important piece of legislation for us amid the intensifying effects of the international and digitization age. I do agree that some of the observed flaws could stand amendments as soon as possible. I can only say, in my defense, that my version of the cybercrime bill did not include the rather draconian provisions as to the punishments and sanctions for libel. This 16th Congress, I have so far filed 42 bills. The areas covered by these bills are for the most part in the areas of education, local government, environment, agriculture, housing, cooperatives, and public works. So, kaya makikita po ninyo na kahit lagi namin iniisip na mag-focus sa ibang-ibang kung iilang sektor, ay sa dami ng nagiging problema sa ating lipunan, sa dami ng lumalapit, humihingi ng problema, napupunta rin tayo kahit sa mga ibang sektor na akalain na hindi ating espesyalidad, ngunit ito po ay nakikita natin malaki ang pangangailangan. Now, as to this Congress, I offered the postponement of the Sangguniang Kabataan elections, and that is why in these upcoming elections there will not be SK elections, but only for the barangay. This is because we wanted time to introduce much needed reforms and reorganization to the Sangguniang Kabataan. We have heard so many complaints, we have heard so many failings, we have heard about so many weaknesses and flaws in the Sangguniang Kabataan system. And it was something that brought sadness to me, because I truly believe that young people should have a voice in government. And this is for two reasons. One, because young people should be involved in government. Because when our time is done, then we must have ready to follow us young people who are understanding of the ways of government, who know who are the people in government and how to make government work for the people. The second reason is that the Philippines is a very young country. I do not know if you have noticed, there was a pronouncement by Chairman Boy Brillantes of the COMELEC soon after this last election. And he said that 60% of the voters in 2016 were not yet qualified to vote in 2013. So in the 3 years between 2013 and 2016, will become of voting age 60% of the voters in 2016. Ganun kabata ang Pilipinas. The demographics of the Philippines are such that we are a very young country, and I believe we are getting actually younger. And that is why it is important that young people are involved in government, because they must represent this growing and extremely important sector in our society. The young people have very distinct, singular, and unique issues that the rest of us do no longer have to deal with. Much of it has to do with study, tuition fees, things like bullying, things like exactly the problems of education, the problems that they have within their families, single parenthood, all of these things that the rest of the society do not have to think of. But government must help young people in these issues, and that is why we need to have the younger people represented in government. And that is why it became so important to me that we postpone the SK elections, so that we take the time. We have given ourselves at least about no more than a year to come up with reforms and reorganizational proposals for the SK, so that this SK, which we have seen, it has been, kawawa naman ang ating mga kabataan kung ano-ano ang sinisisi sa kanila. Ito daw ay pugat ng korupsyon. Ito ba ay tinuturuan lang na maging trapo. Ito ba ay mga anak lang daw ito ng mga mayor, ng mga barangay captain, at hindi naman talaga galing sa grassroots. This is not the fault of young people. If that is indeed the case, it is not the fault of the youth. It is the fault of those of us who have designed the system and to allow those kinds of abuses to happen. And that's what we are going to be doing for the next year, and to make sure that by October of 2014, we will have instituted those reforms, and in that time, we'll be ready to elect new SK officials within our new system, and in that way, we will see true representation of young people in the national government. Finally, since my appointment in this Congress, the Chairman of Senate Committee on Public Works, I have initially conducted a hearing with the Department of Public Works and Highways with regard especially to the effects of climate change, directly causing the ever-increasing flood problems, not only in Metro Manila, but it involves the outlying provinces of our country as well. Our first committee hearing focused on the flood management plan of the government, on the proposed measures regarding disaster mitigation through the effective and integrated management of the country's river basins, primarily in and around Metro Manila. Also deliberated upon in this hearing were the plans and programs of the National Irrigation Administration with regard to the state of our farm irrigation system in relation to our priority program of food security. In connection with this, last Wednesday, I asked for a meeting with Secretary Crossy Alcala to voice my concerns over the lack of investment. Ito na naman ako, paulit-ulit ang aking, parang it has become my mantra. The lack of public investment in infrastructure and irrigation systems are a key element in our infrastructure development. Dahil ang budget ng irrigation natin ay binawasan. At kung ano yung hiningi ng NIA ay hindi naman tinanggal ng DBM, at ngayon wala tayong bagong pondo para sa NIA. Now, that's what I was discussing with Secretary Crossy Alcala, and I was telling him that paano niya matutupad ang kanyang pangako na magkakaroon tayo ng self-sufficiency kung walang patubig na maganda. Ito ay galing na rin sa experience ko sa Ilocos Norte, na hindi mo talaga pwedeng padamihin ang inyong ani kung hindi maganda ang inyong patubig at inyong ayuda. Ganyan lang naman ang buhay ng farmer. Kaya ito ay isang napaka-importanteng bagay. And it would seem to be something that is only on the fringes of government. But in fact, it is at the very core of what we do as workers in government. If we cannot provide our people with a sufficient amount of nutrition and food, then we are failing in a basic service that we must be able to provide. And that is why it was alarming to me after these hearings to find that we needed so much work to be done and no funding had been coming through it. We are now in the process of trying to come up with some solutions so that in the budget hearings upcoming in the next few weeks, we will be able to remedy that situation. In the further areas of public infrastructure, I equally share the vision for a much bigger focus on the improvement of our road network and other concomitant infrastructure. If we are to accelerate our nation's economic development, then we must do this. That's why this last Thursday, your Committee on Public Works held a hearing to deliberate on bills that seek to reallocate the disposition of monies collected from the motor vehicles users charge and given to and administered by the road board. This multi-billion fund, which as we all know is charged to us vehicle owners and which are collected when our motor vehicles are registered with the LTO, is proposed to allocate 50% of it to new purpose, which is to create a special mass transit system. Dahil nakikita po natin na kulang na ang ating maintenance, ang ating pagbabago ng ating mass transit system. Nakikita natin yan dahil sa paglala ng sitwasyon ng traffic dito sa Maynila. At hindi lamang dito sa Manila, lahat ng urban centers ay nararamdaman na yan. I am sure many of you have recently visited Cebu, have recently visited Davao, ramdam na ramdam ninyo na itong pagdaloy ng trapiko ay pabagal ng pabagal. The bill seeking to lower this, lower the load limits, for example, on loading of our trucks, is also an attempt to help lengthen the life of our roads and our bridges, which again is an important factor because the funding for these infrastructure development is slow coming and could be described as few and far between. Also on the table are other proposed infrastructure projects with priority focus on flood mitigation, the continuing and much needed farm-to-market roads, renewable sources of energy, and in all these, the implied need for job creation cannot be overemphasized. If our people are to benefit from the so-called 7.2 GDP growth, and because of that, I just filed a bill focused precisely on job creation. Because we have heard, and our economic managers, rightly so, have proudly announced to us that the growth rates are 7.5%, 7.8%. But the other alarming statistic that accompanies it is that although our economic growth rate is quite high, our unemployment rate also grows at the same rate as our growth rate in economy. It also runs at around 7%. And when you ask ordinary citizens, what is the biggest problem that you have? I think the average answer is going to be walang trabaho. And we have the situation in the Philippines, and where even our poverty rates and even our unemployment rates have been are a little different from what we see in the Western countries. Whereas in the United States, for example, the problem is not jobs. There are jobs, but the local citizens, the locals, the Americans will not take them because they are not quality jobs. And that's why the immigrants are important to the economic viability of the economic system of the United States. In the Philippines, we do not discern between quality job, non-quality. A Filipino will take any job that they can have para lang mapakain ang kanyang pamilya, para lang mapaaral ang kanyang anak. And this is the kind of problem that we are facing. So I have proposed that we organize across the lines of the different departments. We organize our forces and put together. Because what we have now is that all in the different departments, everyone is trying to do something to create jobs. And that is, again, a very noble concept because it is what is necessary and it is what our citizens are crying for. But these efforts are not coordinated. And that is what I propose to do with my bill, is to coordinate all those efforts so that that synergy that comes from a directed effort that follows a single plan will be realized. Again, we are not the richest country in the world, and funding is always a question, and that's why we must make the most of what we have. Let me also report to you that I have been active in the deliberation on the pending legislative proposals to continue to guard and uplift the welfare of our overseas Filipino workers, our migrant workers. As we all recall, our OFWs have constantly been referred to as bayani or heroes. But it is widely perceived that our so-called heroes are not amply protected with legislation safeguarding their welfare and duly recognizing their significant contribution to the Philippine economy. Just last week, we saw again a report that the OFWs will be remitting record amounts this year. Na ang mga remittances na nanggagaling sa ating mga OFWs ang bumubuhay ng ating ekonomiya. Yun lamang, marami tayong naririnig na problema dahil sa pagbabago. What has happened here is that the OFWs before, in the 70s for example, were all skilled workers. They were engineers, they were architects, and therefore the contracts that they had were more rigorous, were more robust in terms of protecting our OFWs. Ang nangyari ngayon ay dahil sa kakulangan ng trabaho din sa Pilipinas, ang nagiging export na natin ay hindi na yung kagaya noon. It started during the construction boom. We were sending, as I said, we were sending electricians, we were sending plumbers, carpenters, sa skilled labor. Ngayon, hindi na skilled labor ang ating pinapadala. We are sending unskilled labor with the accompanying vulnerability that brings. In that there is no single structure that exists to protect those in that level of the economic ladder. That is something that we need to do, because after all, we all proclaim them to be our heroes, and we do not protect them when they are in need. So, roaring lions, as I go about my legislative responsibility, I sincerely trust and hope that you all will remain true to the ideals and commitments of the Lions International, especially in your role as partners of government in its efforts for accelerated development and inclusive economic growth. Let me now conclude by thanking you once again for inviting me to your 31st anniversary and to your 32nd induction ceremonies. I look forward to be of further service to you all during the second half of my term as Senator, always to be your conscientious and committed partner in nation building. Once again, my warmest greetings on your 31st anniversary, and to your newly inducted, to those new directors and officers, my warmest and sincerest congratulations. Maraming salamat at magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Mabuhay ang Lions Club International, District 30182, Philippines.
Mabuhay po